I'll go through the slideshow kind of that I had, just so that we have some consistency here. The reason why I was in Italy, uh, as I was discussing last week, was um, I was working as the kind of the production and technology director on this shoot. It was a travel, kind of like a travel photography shoot that we were doing in Italy. This photographer here, his name is Jack Hollingsworth. He's a commercial kind of lifestyle and stock photographer. And so it was a team of four of us that went over to Italy, and we lived on a really pretty ship for 2 weeks, and kind of went to each of these locations and shot different either video or still photography for travel. So just listening to Jack kind of, pontificate and talk about it, I picked up some cues, and this is Paul, our director of photography. He did all the video work. He's pretty marvelous at that, and we've got to see these various locations. So that's the team right here in on the island of Ponza, our very first stop. And again, I'm just going through some quick things here before we actually start processing, because I want to give you some tips just in terms of the actual shooting to do. So as I told you, we lived on this massive ship, this sail ship. It had four masts. It was huge. It's called the Royal Clipper, part of the Star Clippers line. And it's easy a lot of times when you go on vacation to just kind of get sidetracked, or kind of get your creativity oozes out, because it's just everything is just built for you. There's nothing really that is creative, but sometimes it's just a matter of looking differently, looking at things more abstractly, like these masts. I was mesmerized by how many different lines there were. It's chaotic. It's beautifully chaotic, and so this is something you can do. You can work with. You could probably turn it into a really nice high-key black and white image. I am not done with. I haven't even started working on this image, but I wanted to show you that just something as simple as this, it boosts the creativity, and it's not so much, I think, getting the shot. Like, okay, I got the shot. It's what happens to your mind when this kind of hits. Like, you look up, you see this, like, oh wow, this is kind of cool. Now my mind is engaged. I'm seeing things in this type of way, and it starts kind of getting you on a roll. So sometimes something that's intangible can actually lead to some really creative stuff, because now you'll start seeing things slightly differently. Um, a lot of times it's just a matter of asking. And I have, with the first shot we're going to work on is kind of falls under that vein, just asking. In this case here, what I asked was, originally this vessel was in the water, and I wanted it in the foreground because I kind of like this overall crop here, and I wanted something to have an anchor, as it were, in the foreground. So I asked the owner of this boat, who was sitting just behind me, in that in that very, very universal broken hand language of English to Italian, if he can pull his boat out, and so he did, and I was able to get a shot that I liked. Also, it's just getting kind of out of your comfort zone. I brought this up last time. This was in the middle of a pretty busy little street going into a tunnel. The bus that we were on stopped, and so I got out and just made the most of it. And so, I wasn't too familiar with traffic laws, so it was really much a matter of just kind of getting outside of the box and thinking of something to shoot. And I'm always mesmerized by these traffic signs that are outside of the U.S. that just slightly different from what we have here. And this was the ship that we lived on for 2 weeks. This is the Royal Clipper. So one of the last points I want to make is the difference between vantage point, even with the same lens. So this is Sorrento, and this is one of my favorite scenes that I saw in all of Italy. It's just magnificent, absolutely and utterly breathtaking. And this is with a fisheye lens. And if you walk down, or rather up the street, this leads you to the beach where or most of the boats kind of dock, or more. If you walk up, there's this kind of set of staircases that essentially kind of goes up the wall. It's not difficult, but it is, it is strenuous in terms of how many stairs you have to walk. The point is, this was about halfway up, and I took kind of like a head-on shot with the fisheye just to get a nice kind of perspective shot. But if you get down to the ground floor, same lens, but totally different vantage point, different perspective, gives you instantly a different shot. And so, uh, it's about taking advantage of what you have in front of you with the glass that you have. Also, it's about, if you're going on one of these cool trips, don't rule out the possibility of renting glass. So if you don't own a fisheye, I strongly recommend considering renting one. Fisheye lenses are some of my favorite lenses in the world, and they scream just kind of creativity. They instantly help you bust out of a funk if you are just not getting shots. You're kind of becoming disenchanted. A lot of times people shoot with this lens they're comfortable with, usually like somewhere between a 24 to 70 millimeter lens or a 50 millimeter lens, and that is a very safe lens because it gives you, for the most part, close to a 35 millimeter or 50 millimeter aspect. Still, that can also lead to some sort of block, creativity block, and it's fun to kind of distort. Distortion should be embraced creatively. I'm going to skip the rest of the kind of lecture. We can do them at the end if you'd like, but what I want to do is just jump into the actual processing of the images. Actually, let me go back into Lightroom. All right, so I mentioned here, let me go here to this mid-range. I mentioned that sometimes it's best to ask. So in the case before, what I had asked the owner of the boat if I can bring his boat onto the beach because it was kind of floating in the water. And here, this was in I think Amalfi or no, this might be Sorrento as well. I believe it is Sorrento, yeah. And I wanted to get a shot of this entire front. I just loved it. Something about it really kind of appealed to me, especially the kind of lemons. So what I did was I walked in and I asked the proprietor there who spoke English if it would be okay to take a picture, and I gave her my business card. Now there are a few points here. First, by asking, what that did was that she actually helped me in the fact that she kind of kept people walking in and out of the store for the few minute or so that I was getting my brackets, but also it was just nice to know that I wouldn't be interrupted for that duration. Now, two things to note. One, it's not a bad thing to print business cards. I see entire blog articles. I see people just stressing over the design of the business cards. It's like that scene out of American Psycho where everyone's comparing their business cards. A business card isn't really, you shouldn't distract the owner from, or the person who you give the card to, with the overall design. The business card should just have your information. Yeah, a picture might be nice, that's fine, but for me, the primary purpose of a business card is for the person I give it to go to my website or contact me. I don't want my business card to be my portfolio. So I gave her my business card, and that was just kind of a side note. The point of that was make business cards up. Take them with you. You don't have to be a professional photographer or whatever a professional photographer even means. But to have a business card with your contact information is a wonderful asset to have because not a lot of people necessarily have pen and paper or smartphones or anything like that. By giving them you put the ball in their court and you give them an instant opportunity to contact you. Now the other thing that I promised was that I would email her a final copy of this image. High res JPEG. I'm not going to give anyone my raw files, but I'm not worried about it. She was nice enough to do this for me. So the key here is if you do promise to exchange, access for an image, a final image, please follow through with that because what will happen, and you might actually experience this, is the owner will say, no, I let photographers hear all the time. They always say they promise up and down they'll send me, and nothing ever happens. You consider it kind of like paying it forward, in terms of you do this, you kind of enrich the owner and their sense towards photographers, and trust, and then you know it goes forward and forward. So, you know, do not discount that, how important that can be. All right, enough of my that. I hope it helped, but these are things that I think really do help, especially when you're going overseas. If it's someone from abroad coming to the U.S. or vice versa, it's experiencing it firsthand really opened my eyes to what it takes to be successful in travel photography. There's of course the component of the actual photography itself, but it's also really nice to have the cooperation of the locals. So this shot here, I bracketed this shot because you can see this is the kind of mid-range exposure, and you get a little bit of the light over here, but the wall had beautiful texture to it that you could see if we go down to some of the faster brackets. It had some really, really nice kind of texture. It's just very, very, I don't know, something about it is indicative of this place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the bracket. So let's actually process it. Now, we'll do this one of two ways. We'll process it in Photomatix and we'll process it in HDR Express. The reason why I want to do it in Photomatix is if you see here, let me start from the mid-range. Pay attention to this area over here with this kind of stack of lemons, or the I'm losing it today with my ability to speak, so I apologize for that. But notice how they're kind of moving around because of, I assume there was wind, even though nothing else is really moving. But that's fine. What we're going to do is let's first send it to Photomatix, and we'll actually do some ghost reduction, manual ghost reduction. So I'm going to go to export with preset to my Photomatix plugin, and I'm going to turn this option here called Reduce Ghosting Artifacts. I'm going to rename this to dash HDRX. The reason why I have X is I play around with all different types of tone mapping products, and I always put a dash HDR next to the tone map version, but the letter here is kind of a code. Like X is for Photomatix, E is for HDR Express, and H is for HDR FX Pro by Nick, P is for Photoshop, and so on and so forth. So let's hit OK, and we'll let Lightroom send the images to Photomatix. Now, the first thing that happens here is you get this selective deghosting. And right off the bat, you can see, if we kind of zoom in, you can see over here, let me zoom in a little bit more so you can see a little bit better. This this patch of lemons is kind of ghosted. Everything else looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw around this selection here. And then in order to make it a selection, you have to right-click inside the selection you made. So if I right-click, this little contextual menu comes up, and I'm going to select Mark Selection as Ghosted Area. The broken arrow line, or the broken line, turns into a solid line, which indicates this is now a selection for deghosting. What I'm going to do is hit Preview Deghosting, and it's going to show me it's basically sampling from one of the exposures, and this looks pretty good. You can see here, if you right-click in the selection and go to Set Another Photo for Selection, you can actually sample from different options here. So this is sampling from the +1 exposure. Now let's try the 0 exposure just to compare and see if it's any different. It's also good. I might just stick with that brighter one. So I'm going to go back here and then select that +1. That's good. All right, when I'm done, that's really all I want to deghost. I'm going to hit OK. And it was nice because I didn't have to worry about anything. I didn't have to worry about anyone coming in or anyone coming out. So right off the bat, this is the result with Photomatix. What we're going to do is let's start playing around. I'm going to reset everything to default by hitting this default button at the bottom. What that does is it resets all of these sliders to their default positions. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the strength up. I do this usually by default, and then I'll drop it down as needed because I didn't like what was happening up here in the top left corner. I also look at my histogram. This is something I strongly recommend you do in Photomatix or any product that has a histogram. In Photomatix, if you go to View, you can select 8-bit histogram, and it'll pop it up. The reason for that is you can see we have some slight blown highlights. You can tell if you have any blown highlights or clipped shadows by whether or not the ends are bunched up. So here you can see you've got your mid-tone, and then it turns to highlight, and then at the highlights it bunches up. That means that you've got an area that has some loss of information, probably right over here. That looks like that's the brightest part of the scene. We're good on the shadow end, so that's good there. The reason why we have that blown highlight is because right off the bat, the default point for the white point of Photomatix is 0.25%, which is way high. So if we drop it down to about 0.15, it instantly gets rid of that. And then we'll also bring the black point up slightly to give it a little bit of contrast. Now we're starting to get somewhere. We've got nice warm light here. We've got we still have to work on the outside. We can work on the outside by adding some luminosity and boosting up our gamma, which is the brightness of the image. Bring up the luminosity a little bit more, and some detail contrast. And this is pretty much how I work. These are the sliders I primarily use in Photomatix. Now I'll make it just a tad brighter in the highlights. That's good. Let's go to, and you can see that the lemon here is nice and sharp. Go to File. Why is my save not here? Oh, that's why. No, why? Oh, it's right over here. Save and re-import. So that's going to bring the image right over here. Now let's just experiment, and let's select the same group. Oops, same group of images, but I'm going to deselect the HDR one. Let's send it to HDR Express, and let's do a taste test. Now with HDR Express, one of the differences is that the ghost reduction is not user selective, meaning it applies globally. It'll apply to the entire image. Whereas in Photomatix, we were able to make that selection on just the little bundle of lemons. So the key here is to select the ghosting, the ghost reduction algorithm that is most appropriate. So by default, you have to have one turned on. Because these are radio buttons, it means that only once a selection has to be made. You can't check it on or off, unlike the align sources, which you could turn on and off. Natural is the default. That's what I typically use. From what I was told, it basically gives you a nice seamless blend between your brackets. Sharp edges is what I think we're going to use here, and that's for anything that has kind of a sharp edge to it, like the lemon. That the batch of lemons has a sharp edge to it. It's not like clouds or water. And then smooth edges is the combination of these two. And I don't think I went over natural. Natural would be something like clouds and water. Now, to play it safe, I'll probably just go to smooth edges because it uses, like I said, a combination of the two, and I'm going to hit merge. Edward's asking if there's an ETA in perfect layers. I don't have a hard date for you, but it is going to be coming out soon, the Gold Master version. All right, so here is HDR Express. And HDR Express is pretty simple, and you can. One thing I do like is it shows you your tonal range. So right here we have 16 stops of information. And that is a pretty nice large amount. We've also got our histogram up here. So let's do this. So let's bring the overall brightness up. And we'll bring the highlight recovery also up just a bit. Shadows, I'm going to drop down because I like to have rich shadows. Black point is good right around where it is. Contrast is more like localized contrast. So if you bring it way up, you get this kind of like very, very harsh textured look. So use that extremely sparingly. And saturation is good. The white balance I'm going to drop down because I want to cool it off just a bit. Let's hit save, and then let's change this to HDRO. Oh no, E rather. All right. So the image should pop up, and here it is. Now let's take a look between the two. All right. So on the left, you've got HDR Express, and on the right you've got Photomatics. Let's look at the ghost reduction here, and I think you'll agree that they both did a pretty good job. The lemon is nice and still in the HDR Express, which uses the global algorithm. There are some things that I kind of like about the Photomatics one. I like that you can see more in the store, which can happen. And I kind of like the overall look. It's a bit washed out over here, but I do like that it's a little bit brighter. And I could have adjusted it in HDR Express by increasing the shadow recovery, but that would have come at a loss to the rest of the image. All right, and Kathy, I see your question. It's actually a good question, and I'll bring it up once we finish this. I do like it though. Any question about gear, I'm happy with. So here's what we can do. Let's take both of these images and let's just try sending them to perfect layers, just like Edward just mentioned. We'll go to perfect layers and we'll do some brief masking. We'll just blend the two images together. Why not? So here, this first layer is the Photomatics layer. And if we turn it off, under it is the HDR Express layer. No one says you have to use one or the other. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the HDR Express layer on top because I like seeing the full image. Now then I'm going to use a masking brush and I'm going to drop the opacity of the brush so it doesn't paint out right away, in a full amount. And I'm just going to start painting out and revealing some of the Photomatics layer, kind of like the best of both worlds, and then maybe a little bit more. And if you think you painted in too much, like if that's too much, you can just change the masking mode from paint out to paint in. Let's drop the opacity even less so that it's restoring even less of that. So it's kind of like a nice in-between point. But that's good because now that's showing, and it's giving a little bit of depth. We'll go back to the paint out and bring the opacity up slightly and kind of bring detail into the these hanging chilies. And it's looking okay. I might start over altogether, and to start over in that area, just paint out in 100%, and then I'll bring everything back in. Just make sure you get everything, and to be sure you can show your mask. So right now we have nothing, or you can show it in white, which is sometimes easier. Oh, we do have a little bit. All right, and then we can start over. Again, we'll paint out, and I might drop it even less, and then what this allows me to do. Oh, wait, 1 second. There we go. That's allowing me to bring in very small increments the detail there. And so I'll look around here and I'll see if there's anything else that I want to kind of meld in. Maybe a tiny bit of the spine up top. Just a tiny bit. Because I do like the way Photomatics handled the area around the text. Let's see here. Yeah, we're doing okay. And that's good for now. Let's hit save to update the PST, and then let's have some fun in this suite. So there is our updated PSD file. This kind of has the best of both worlds. Let's send it to Photoshop. So you can see here, and I always like to bring this up, that Photoshop recognizes the layers that you created in perfect layers. So you have the titles here, you've got the mask that was created. Now, let's do a few things. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp visible, which means I'm going to create a new layer from all visible layers without merging. The way to do that is go to the layer menu here in Photoshop, go to Merge Visible, and then before you click on Merge Visible, on a Mac, press the Option key, and on a PC, press the Alt key. And by pressing that, you're actually going to stamp that layer, meaning you're going to create a third layer or a new layer without getting rid of the underlying layers. And this is convenient because this is kind of like a new snapshot now. Now I can start working without affecting these underlying layers. All right, a few things I want to do. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a selection using a lasso tool around, actually that's not a good selection. Let me make it a little bit wider. Around this light. This light bothers me, I don't want it. So I'm going to go to Edit, Fill, and we're going to use the Content-Aware Fill, which is in this drop-down, to sample other parts of the wall. And that does a nice job. Boom, it's gone. I'm going to try my luck with a few other things. I'm going to go here, see how that looks. It's doable, I can blend it in. I'm going to try my luck over here. Actually, before I do that, let me see if I can just clone this area out very quickly. Because I'm very much a fan of not having distractions. Now, I'm going to blend this in a little bit better, but for now, I just want to see what Content-Aware Fill will do for me. It's not terrible. I would probably clone this area out here. I'm not going to do it because it would take too much time. But I consider myself adept enough at healing, cloning, and content aware where I know whether something is salvageable or not. I could tell you that that stuff is salvageable. So that's good. After that, I'll probably just use the spot healing brush, which is right there, and just kind of get rid of little dust spots that my dirty sensor left behind. If you're traveling, that's probably something you might want to invest in. If you don't do it yourself, you can always go to like one of the professional camera stores, the local ones, and have them clean your sensor for you. Usually costs anywhere from $40 to $60 depending on the vendor, or you can do it yourself. All right, so let's just pretend that's good. I know this would take a lot longer for me to get rid of. I would get rid of it though, just because it's absolutely ugly. And I would get rid of that over there as well. But just to give you an idea of what I would do, this is typically what I would do. I might also just do some fine cloning and kind of get rid of that stain over here, just kind of clean it up. Now we can go into Photo Tools, and let's just kind of tweak the image a bit. So right off the bat, there are a few, for those of you that may not be familiar with my webinars, with Photo Tools, I treat the image very much in different elements. I see the wall as an element. I see the interior as an element, the groceries as an element, and the pavement. So I try to kind of uniquely stylize them. I'm going to start with the wall, or this kind of part of the wall that frames the door. And if I go into the stylized effects category, which contains all of these kind of funky effects that Photo Tools has, let's go straight to Blue Dawn Leonidas and let's add it to the stack to see whether or not this is something I like. And I thought I would like it, but I don't, so I'm going to get rid of it. Instead, we can try Moulin Rouge. And what I'm looking for specifically is an effect that will give me a nice look to this area here. Absolutely not. Don't like it whatsoever. And this is kind of what you have to do. We could try Thermopylae just for that area. It might give it a unique kind of edgy look. I do like that. I like that a lot. So watch what I'm going to do. You see how it's applying to the whole entire image? And it looks kind of cool, but I don't want that. I just want it to apply to this area here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Invert Mask, and that hides the effect. It's still there. What it allows me also to do is it allows me to select my masking brush. I'm going to change my mode from paint out to paint in. And I'm also going to turn on this option here, which I don't think many of you have ever seen me use. And it's called Wacom Controls Opacity. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to bring my opacity up pretty high. Now, what that means is I have a Wacom Intuos 4 tablet. And the tablet is pressure sensitive. I think up to like something like 2,000 different levels, or a little over 2,000 levels of pressure sensitivity, I think. Now, by setting your opacity to wherever it is. This is the maximum the brush will paint to if you press down hard. You can press down gently and watch. As I press, you'll see the slider go back and forth based on the pressure. So in the middle here, I'm going to press hard. You see how it comes out? And as I let go, it kind of goes down. So I can control, as I get to the edge, I can be a little bit lighter so that I minimize the bleed onto the wall. So here I'm just kind of painting light. I'm going to drop the size of my brush. And this is, I found this to be a huge time saver for masking effects in. Like when I get in here, I can kind of get really hard because I know that that's 100% of what I want the effect to be. But when I get to the edge, I'll let the feathering and the lower opacity take control. And that's why I love my Wacom tablet. And that's no secret. I've long preached about the goodness of tablets with editing, with fine editing. This is a lot easier for me to do than to use a mouse. Just for me. I mean, each person has their own style. But the key is you can see that I'm basically painting in areas that are similar. So like this area here has the same look and feel of that area of the stairs. All right. Just make sure I got everything. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to boost out the lemons. And to do that, I'm going to use an effect called pastel colors, which I use pretty often because I know it affects certain colors. And you can see how anything that's yellow or green just popped. Now, I'm going to drop the strength to 0 because I don't want the effect to bias me. And I'll just bring it up until I'm happy, like right around here, 35%. I will take my masking brush and I'm going to select paint out and 100% because I don't want the effect too strong over here. So I'm lightly just painting out in this area here. I like it over here. And I like it. I'm going to paint it out of the sign that I just masked in because the thermopylae effect has colors that pastel colors will enhance that I don't want. I think the last effect I'm going to apply is Golden Hour Enhancer because I like what it does to warm the overall image. I do like it. I think I'm going to let it apply universally, but I'm going to drop it down to 0 and boost it up until I'm happy. So about 54%. Oh, there is one more thing I'm going to try to do. So check this out. I kind of want this to be the brightest part of the image. I want to have a nice kind of customized vignette. This is what I've been doing a lot lately. I will go to the lighting effects category, and you'll see the second effect called dynamic light, and it's got a little focus bug, or technically it's a masking bug in Photo Tools. Now I'm going to select, in this case, dark and plain or dark and round, and I'm going to hit add to stack. And you can see here is our bug. And let me bring it up, the strength up really, really strong so you can see. See, there's our bug, and anything we put on the bug will be dark. So let's put the bug on the door here. Just kind of shape it. I don't care whether it's totally even or not because I'll show you why in a second. So here we've got the dark bug here. Let me drop the strength a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the invert mask button. And what that'll do is that will make everything outside of the bug dark except for whatever's inside. So boom. Now we've got a nice custom vignette. It might be a bit too strong, so you can drop the strength to 0 and just bring it up a bit. But you can see how now the eye is being drawn to the middle here. Also, let's say I want the vignette kind of, watch, if I want the stairs to be a little bit darker, I can use my masking brush and just paint in the effect. Drop it down a bit here, but kind of paint the dark vignette right there so that this also gets dark. I can also, if I want to be nuts, apply another dynamic light and round, and just boost it just a tiny bit. So now we've got this in here. Let's put it down here. Now let's just drop it down just so we can give it a tiny boost. Now we're talking. Now this is looking pretty cool. I'm going to hide the palette by hitting none, and I'm going to go to Window, or rather to View, and Fit to Screen. Now let's see the before and the after. Here's the original, and this is what we were able to do with photo tools. Give it a nice kind of, really nice kind of vintage feel. We'll do one more thing. If we go to categories and go back to the stylized effects, if we add just enough darkness, we can wrangle some of those shadows in. So let's drop it to 0 and just a little bit. Let's hit apply. So we'll let it do its thing. And there we go. So you can see we were able to take two different HDR products and use perfect layers to really blend the best of them in. There's nothing wrong with that. Got to think outside the box. Most people use one. They just stick with one. That's it. Blinders are on. Why? Why? What difference does it make? Um, you know, use what's best for you. If there is one that is truly, I promise to tell you, if there is an HDR product that I find that is just head and shoulders above others, I will let you know. That much I can guarantee. Money. Dave, you got me there. That's true. I speak so cavalier about just buy all the products. Why not? Fair enough. Money. The problem is that at this point, I've used enough products where I can't wholeheartedly recommend one over the other exclusively. I love Photomatics because of that user selective ghost reduction. To me, that is beautiful, and it's only getting better. But I do like HDR effects or HDR Express's kind of natural tone mapping, and I like Nick's product HDR Effects Pro because it gives you a lot of creativity in the different types of HDR tone mapping algorithms. But yeah, David, you make a point. You make a valid point. The only thing I can say is a few things. One, download trials. Actually, that's really it. Download trials and see for yourself. Let me address some of the questions that came in. So Kathy was asking, well, she's saying that she's traveling to Europe this summer and is asking for what lens do I recommend bringing. She's worried that if she brings too many, she'll end up with back problems. Guaranteed you'll end up with back problems. These lenses are not light, or at least not the bigger ones. Now, what do I recommend? I recommend get a nice wide-angle lens. It depends on what kind of camera you have, if it's a cropped sensor or a full-frame sensor, but and also if it's Canon or Nikon, because I'm much more well-versed with Canon lenses. What I recommend is, if you don't have the lenses, like I said at the beginning, rent them. Rent a wide angle, like something like if you have a cropped sensor, get the Canon, and it's a Canon, get the 10 to 22 ultra wide zoom lens. If you have a full frame sensor, rent the 14 millimeter prime. You have a Canon 5D Mark II, so it's a full frame sensor. On a full frame sensor, you can either get, if you want to purchase a lens that's really fantastic, the 17 to 40 Canon is an L series f4 lens. It's a fantastic lens. If you want to open up a stop, you can get the 16 to 35 Canon, which opens at 2.8, or you can get the 14 millimeter prime, which is what I use. I sold my 16-35 for the 14 because I don't ever zoom. I find that I zoom with my legs. I never zoom, or I shouldn't say I rarely zoom. And then so that'll cover you in the wide angle, because you will probably go to see some very, very nice vistas, and it's kind of cool to get a nice sweeping wide angle shot. The 2470, like I said, is probably the most boring but safest lens. Canon and Nikon have them. Great general purpose lens. It's the lens I usually put on if I'm going somewhere and I don't really know anything about it, and I just need to get some shots. So truthfully, I would do an ultra wide. I would do the 2470 or a 50 millimeter prime, and then I would do a long lens, something like a 70 to 200. The 70 to 200 is going to be a heavier lens. The 2470 is kind of heavy too. But but it's just a matter of I would just rent it, and it's a nice luxury. Those three lenses should suit you fine. If you can cover your focal length from anywhere to from like 14 or 16 all the way through like 200, and if you really don't want to carry big lens, but you want to give yourself a little extra stretch, get a teleconverter, a 1.4 or 2-time teleconverter. Um, William is it's Photomatics. I'll put it in the chat module so you can with the proper spell. Actually, I'll just put you to their website. This is the website for Photomatics. It's hdrsoft.com. Peter wants a Wacom tablet. You should, Peter. This Thursday we've got a joint webinar with Wacom, which I can't wait for. We've got a lot of people registered, so you should join it because we'll have some of my buddies from Wacom going into the kind of like Wacom 101, introducing you. Joan asks a question: do you ever do things like noise reduction before tone mapping the images? No. I don't touch. The only thing, Joan, I do to my, and this is actually, Joan gives me a segue too. In June and July, I'm doing a joint webinar with X-Rite on color management and HDR specifically. So to this point, to answer the question, the only thing I'll ever do to my brackets before tone mapping is color management, meaning I'll do a custom white balance and I'll do a color profile. Just so that the brackets have correct color. And I have examples where that makes a huge improvement. Noise reduction I will do on the image. Actually, let's go to an image to that point. That gives me that opportunity. I'm going to close here. I don't need to save this. Let's go to this image. Yep, cool. Let's go over here. So yeah, I'll do noise reduction when it's tone mapped. I can put your request, and Peter's wondering if we can ever have the brush be square as opposed to circular. I can ask if we could put that as a feature request. I don't know how difficult it'll be to implement, but we're always open to feature requests. Tapas, I'll come to your question in a minute. The Wacom webinar will be posted after we record it, absolutely. No, Ernesto's asking whether I used, so Photomatics has an option. Let's just do that really quickly. If I select all of these images here, before I do anything, let's send them to Photomatics. Photomatics has an option to do noise reduction, reduce noise. I don't turn it on. I never turn it on because I don't want noise. I have a dedicated product for noise reduction called Denoise by Topaz, and I like it. Where's this location in Italy? This is Capri. It was kind of a storm was rolling in, so this is the ship that I lived on right there. That's to give you a sense of scale. That is the Royal Clipper. It's massive. And we were just kind of killing time because we didn't have enough time to make it to where we wanted to, so we just kind of futzed around the main square. And this is kind of another example of why I think sometimes HDR, we could probably do some in this case here, exposure blending might not work too well because this is probably your best exposure for your foreground. We've got a lot of kind of like hot details here, so if we try to blend them in, I wouldn't like it. So let's go here. Let's do another quick taste test. We'll go to Photomatics and let's work on the image. So my Photomatics. Don't need any ghost reduction, and let's let it do its thing. HDRX. So yeah, Ernesto, I don't tell Photomatics to do that. Okay. So here, it's a bit too bright, so there are a few things I'll do, like I'll start dropping gamma um, and start dropping luminosity until I kind of get a good overall base exposure. I'm pretty happy with how it's handling the clouds. I'm happy with pretty much mostly everything. It's not an ideal exposure, but it's something to work with that we can kind of play around with. Let me see what is going on here. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's see what else we can do. You can always adjust the lighting slider a little bit. Don't go too crazy with it because that's when you're going to start getting really bad, kind of like halos, and it's going to look like a bad HDR image. All right, let's just keep it like this. We'll save and re-import. Now let's use HDR Express, and maybe we can do some more blending. Just use the default. Let's let it do its thing. What is the model of the Wacom tablet I use? I have two of them, David. I use the Intuos 4 medium and the Intuos 4 large because I have two machines. And the medium, if you have the medium is pretty much the exact same size as the 15-inch MacBook Pro, so it travels with me. That's my laptop, and then I've got a Mac Pro where I have the large tablet. All right. So here, just going to play around with sliders. I really don't like using the highlight recovery slider, but it's necessary to wrangle in the blown out highlights, which you can see over here. We might not need to do much of any blending, but I'm not 100% yet on that. What I try to do is compare the results of whenever I have multiple images. So here, let's save this. Let's HDRE. All right, so there's Express, Photomatics, Compare. All right. Oh, wrong bracket. That and that. All right. HDR Express on the left, Photomatics on the right. What I might blend a little bit of the foliage here. This is a common problem. You've got this kind of like really bright area in the trees here, which shouldn't be that bright. This is about more representative. So I think I'm just gonna take both of these images again. Let's go into perfect layers and just do a quick blend between the two. All right, so this is Photomatics. All right, so here what we'll do is we'll paint out. See kind of how we're instantly kind of getting a better exposure. It's a little bit more realistic. You have to look out for these things. These are the things that are important. What I will do is try to clone out the boat. Oops, wrong direction. Because I like how HDR Express tone map the boat. Well, smaller than that. Just pops it out a bit. You want to be very careful with your mapping here because you don't want to um, mask out the water. We can fix everything else. So, but to go back to the question by Ernesto, and who else asked it about noise reduction? Joan did. The sky is riddled with two things, with dust spots, which are easy enough, but it also has noise, which I don't know if it's coming through very well. We can kind of zoom in, and you can see, let me zoom in one more factor. You can see all that noise. So let's go here and save this. Oops. Close this out. And there is our blended image. And let's just let's send it to Photoshop so I can do noise reduction. So again, I'm going to stamp my layer. And what I'll do for noise reduction here is I'm just going to use this quick select brush and just kind of get, I'm going to keep even the water because the water was a bit noisy too. And I'm fine with this. This is a bit sloppy, but so be it. Um, I'm going to then go to Filter, Topaz, Denoise, go to, that's actually not bad. That's better. All right, let it do its thing. It'll just smooth things out. Okay, so that got rid of a lot of that noise. And I might burn this mountain a bit. It's a bit too bright for my taste. But now we can kind of stylize. Before we do that, let's do this. Let's actually save this because I realized what I wanted to do here. So what I wanted to do is actually crop this out, like do a significant crop. Get it really, really small and just kind of focus on this. Oh, you know what? I realized I was working on this image on my original computer where I didn't compress it. I actually compressed the images down for webinars. So this is too small to work in. Yeah, let's not crop it. We'll just keep it as is. There. All right, let's go back into Photoshop. All right, now we can go into Photo Tools. What I originally wanted to do was, I'm just kind of draw here. I kind of wanted the frame to consist of this a little bit. I liked having the patch of blue sky be, take up the predominant amount of the frame in the sky instead of having all this. I could crop it down, but it won't look as good on your screen, so I don't want to do that right now. But that is what I wanted to do for the frame. We could still work on it. I'm not afraid to work on this image. Let's go to Photo Tools. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to, again, go straight to pastel colors, which is under stylized effects, because I love what it does to trees. You can see kind of how it gives it a glow, but not at 100%. Let's just drop it down just a little bit so it looks kind of lush. I'm also going to apply golden hour enhancer because I'm not liking the overall feel here. I think golden hour enhancer will do a nice job of warming. Ooh, that's nice actually. Normally I'll remove golden hour enhancer from the sky, but I like having it warm over here and just kind of looks nice. Nothing, there are no hard and fast rules, my friends. Nothing says you have to do one way or the other. And then the final effect I'm going to apply is probably sun glow to brighten the image up, but it also softens it at the same time. All right, so I think you guys can see we're making some nice progress here. Let's hide this and then turn the preview off. It's kind of drab over here. It's looking kind of nice here. I'm going to hit apply, and then we're going to go to the focal point and see if we can kind of bring our point of focus over here in the center of the frame. Kind of the best of both worlds. I really don't want you focusing on the dirty rooftops over here. So if we go into focal point, got to know how to kind of improvise. I wanted a crop, didn't look as good. So let's go here, let's edit and reset all. Here's our focus bug. So what I'm going to do right away is I want my focus bug dictates what's in focus and what's out of focus. I'm going to change the shape from round to planar, and then I'm going to kind of adjust it so that it's kind of on this horizon here. The next thing I'm going to do is to give it kind of a miniature look, I'm going to change the axis of the blur. To change the axis of the blur, you have to put your cursor in the body of the bug. So my cursor is inside the body, and you hit Option on a Mac, Alt key on a PC, and drag up or down. You can see how we're changing the axis of that blur. Okay, next, this is looking way too fake, so I'm going to drop the amount of blur significantly. You don't need a lot. Maybe about 9% is good. Maybe even less, like 7%. That's good. I'm also going to drop the brightness and boost the contrast so that your eye kind of focuses over here. And then finally, I'm going to add a vignette just to kind of burn the edges. So you can see now we've got this really nice kind of area right here. And the roof is kind of, it's there, but it's out of focus, so you don't really think about it too much. Now I'm going to hit apply. Let's hit save, and I'll show you what I'll do in Lightroom, just to touch it up. In Lightroom, let's go to the Develop module, which we're in already. I'm going to hide this column over here so that we have a little bit more room. Oops. Go away. There we go. I'm going to go to my adjustment brushes, and I'm going to bring up, let's see, I want to bring up the brightness and the contrast and just paint it on the water. Now, I don't mind that it's so bright because I'll show you why. I'm going to kind of draw it here. All right, so we made an overall good selection. Now I can, on the fly, drop that brightness down. Oops. Why isn't that working? Okay, I'll just use the slider then. So you see how you can control how bright it is after the fact. I typically bring the brightness up higher so that I can actually see what the adjustment brush is doing. And then I have a brush here that I built called an HDR texture boost, and what it is, it's a slight kick in brightness, a kick in contrast, and then a kick in clarity and sharpness. And I'm going to just brush it on the landscape here, but only the landscape that I kind of want in focus, and also brush it on the boat. There we go. So can you see how now it's kind of looking like a toy model, like that tilt look that everyone seems to love so much? I'm also going to create a new brush. Brightness, drop it down, and like I said, I wanted to kind of darken this mountain. It's a bit too bright for my taste. And now that I made my selection, I can control if I want it even darker, and I can see that, oops, I painted it out, and I missed this area here. So when I'm done, I can go to erase, paint it out from here, paint the town back in, and that's looking good. So those are just some examples. You can take any image and use the suite to just kind of boost it. I made the ship, the Royal Clipper, brighter than the other ships because I really want your eye to go here. It's also a bit more saturated than normal. Color is a fantastic way to direct your eye, but you don't want to have too many. One of the hallmark problems of I guess bad HDR is you have too many saturated colors. Your eye experiences fatigue. Like when your eye is roaming around here, if you have too many colors, it needs a place to go to relax for a second. And so that's why I kind of take care in trying to, if the trees are too bright or they're too saturated in color, what you can do is if you go down to the HSL palette, so HSL is hue, saturation, and luminance, you see this little bumper over here. I select it and I put it over a color that I find is too whatever. So I put it here and I drop down, and what it's going to do is it's going to desaturate those colors. So it makes them a bit more muted. I'll just park the bumper when I'm done, and there you go. So that was our original before the Lightroom adjustments, and that's with the Lightroom adjustments.